What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Here for the Truth podcast. I'm Joel Rafidi. Got my co-host Erasmus with me. As always, another amazing episode for you in store today. We have Melissa Sell returning, this time joined by Natasha Nazerali, another incredible woman with amazing depth knowledge in GNM. She was actually raised with this information and this education, which I think gives her definitely a unique perspective and a unique way of communicating it, which I think is of amazing value, diving deep into, the biology of women, and actually so much more that it comes about from that foundation. So yeah, just want to shout out our Friends of the Truth members. Thank you so much for being who you are, for being part of our community. For those that don't know, Friends of the Truth is our premium membership platform. We have basic tiers and platinum tiers available to you, and you receive 5 live calls per month. You get access to the membership vault, which now has over 200 hours of exclusive content, exclusive podcasts, exclusive knowledge on German new medicine, on the nervous system, live teachings by us and by some friends as well. And not to mention just being connected to amazing community, which brings so much value to one's life. So to learn more about that, go to hereforthetruth.com and press Friends of the Truth, or hereforthetruth.com/FOTT, and you can become a premium member of the podcast and get amazing value in return. Please enjoy.
You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Gerasimos.
Today, we're joined by 2 amazing guests, Natasha Nazerali and Dr. Melissa Sell, both of whom are deeply rooted in the teachings of German new medicine. Natasha is a GNM practitioner and educator who guides individuals to awaken their true power through the integration of spiritual and biological principles. Inspired by Dr. Harmer's 5 biological laws, Natasha incorporates family systems and ancestral lineage into her work, helping people reconnect with their divine nature and achieve sovereignty over their health. And Melissa, well, she might as well co-host this platform at this point in time. I think this is your 7th time joining us. I think 3 of your episodes, top 10 most downloaded ever. I've got no doubt our audience is very familiar with your work. I understand you both recently spent some time with Erasmus in Costa Rica, which I want to apologize for. I know being in his space and in his energy can be very, very traumatic. Yeah, good to see you both.
Great to be here. Aw, thank you so much for having us. And it was not traumatic being with Gerasimos in Costa Rica. It was very rejuvenating.
Thank you, Natasha. I really appreciate it.
Not what you were saying behind the scenes a second ago, but it's all good.
Well, listen, obviously, Melissa, we've had you on a bunch of times. People know your story. We've gone into a bunch of different subjects. But Natasha, I mean, you've grown up with this knowledge. So we'd love to just get into a little bit of your story and maybe some major rites of passage you've gone through and go from there. How does that sound?
Absolutely. So I have the honor of having a mother who studied this work over 20 years ago, just about 20 years, maybe a little under. Don't want to age her. But she was really, really passionate about holistic health for my entire upbringing. And then she came across this wisdom. And for her, it was kind of that magic thing where it fell into her lap 3 times, on 3 different accounts, somebody mentioned this to her. And it also was because she herself is German. So she's from Hamburg and she speaks German. So all these sort of holistic people in her circle were saying to her, Castine, this is German new medicine. Surely you must know about this, Dr. Hammer. And after the 3rd time of it coming into her awareness, she thought, okay, there's some sort of reason this is coming up in my life, and I want to see what this work is all about. So she studied with Dr. Carolina Merkele, who created learninggnm.com, which is an amazing resource. And it went from there. I grew up having, invites at my house where my mom would have an open door policy and people would come and learn GNM, and she would bring in different educators. And she always taught me not to live in fear of my body. So my way of learning GNM was very experiential, I would have a symptom. My mother would come to me. She would ask me what I've been going through. She would help me connect the dots together. And then I discovered it for myself. So it was my own experience of the truth, which I think is really, really crucial. And I integrated it that way. And then later in my life, I sort of went my own path and came to the realization that my mom was right, that mama knows best, and that all her teachings were highly beneficial. And it was also this really, really full circle moment of this like niche sort of thing that I knew my entire life was all of a sudden coming to the forefront. People were talking about it. We had people like Dr. Melissa Sell using their platform to teach this knowledge. And I was just blown away. Like my mother and I, who were just, hosting little info nights in the living room, were in awe of how much this work has impacted people and how much people are now adopting these values. And I said to my mom, the honor and privilege that I had should be awarded to every family. And so if we can get our boots in the battlefield here and start to teach this work and share this wisdom with as many people as we can, I think that needs to be our path going forward. So that's the path we embarked upon. And that's how I connected with Melissa. And we just made it our mission to share this work with as many people as we can.
Yeah. How did you guys connect in a bit greater detail?
So Music and Sky, the ever magical place, it was so funny because we had the travel ban when I first went to Music and Sky. So I wasn't even allowed to cross the border because they had the mandate. And I just said, no, I know I need to be there. We're going to drive through. It's all going to go smoothly. No one's going to ask us any questions. And it happened just that way. We drove in, nobody asked. We were meant to be there. And I also thought, how cool, this is a sovereign event that is showcasing German new medicine, because that's very rare in the holistic world and in this sort of alternative health community. And the first day we were in a women's circle and I shared my story on what brought me here. And Melissa Sell, she just beelined it to me after that and was like, who are you? And how can we know each other?
Wow, amazing. And did you know of Melissa at that point?
Of course, I knew of her,
Wow,
absolutely,
okay, cool.
but I didn't even know her that well. I mean, I was in the GNM community, so I kind of know of everyone, but how much do you know of just, someone's online Instagram?
Yeah. This is the silver lining of the whole COVID thing, is that I don't think without that, like the knowledge and the wisdom of GNM would have come to the forefront as much.
Well, for sure.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, it was Music and Sky, the first one in 2020 in the desert where, I got invited to come speak and I was like, oh, heck yeah. 2020 was the fall, October of 2020 when things were just like getting really weird and had been weird for a while. And it's like, yeah, we gathered, and that's why, we were such hardcore Music and Sky lovers, because that's where, so much of this, many of us have gathered together and made cool things happen.
Yeah, shout out to Mike, Ian, and Matt.
Yeah.
But I also think it's hard in this alternative health realm because you want to participate in events, and a lot of the ones I was going to, were still touting the germ theory or still saying it's this or that, not understanding like that fifth biological law, the quintessence of there's a reason why this symptom and adaptation is showing up for you. And I feel like that's the missing piece in the community. And that's what I loved about Music and Sky so much, because like with my upbringing, listen, I was in like grade 10 biology class teaching my biology teacher why AIDS is not a thing, So for me, it was just this freeing path of like all these like-minded people who get it.
Yeah.
How was that growing up though? Like, how was it growing up and like being around like, quote unquote normal kids, and you having the knowledge you have, and them going around being like, oh, I think I got the cold, I got a virus. And like, was it something that you kind of just let people kind of do their thing because you had this like secret knowledge, or were you like kind of combative at all? Or were you, having conversations with people and trying to convince them?
I would have conversations in the way in which I thought it was most receptive. So, I was always getting the book out. I remember getting books out and my girlfriends would come over, and I was also really like woo-woo as a young teenage girl. So I would have like the cards and I would be like, oh, you have a cold sore? Like, what's going on? You have a separation? Like, did you kiss a boy? And I would sort of make it really fun. And also, if you know my mother, you know that this is like the first thing that she talks about. So everyone also knew where she stood and what she taught and about this paradigm through her. And I remember being in college, like I would call my mom and say like, I didn't know it so well sometimes. So I say, oh, blah, 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 has this, what does it mean? And I'd put my mom on the phone and be like, tell her what it means. And I'd go through it that way. And anytime someone would say like, yeah, I caught something or this or that, I would just be like, no, that's not very empowering. Or if my mom were there, she would always be like, viruses don't exist. So I think people just thought it was this like funny, quirky aspect. And then it wasn't until COVID that my mom's phone was ringing off the hook because we live in Canada. Things were very intense here. And the people that were on the same page, they had this like aha moment of like, oh, for sure, Castine's on the same page because she's been talking about this for years. So like, we better call her. So everyone in Canada was really forming very tight-knit communities, and that helped too. But yeah, it was an interesting upbringing for sure. But I don't think I ever shied away, even from my youthful age, at sharing what I knew to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Manifester.
Yeah, exactly. Leading by example.
Amazing. So I guess what brought you guys together and what's the niche aspect of this beautiful knowledge that you're looking to bring forth at the moment?
Yeah. So we, Natasha and her mother gather and do events. And so we had been doing events, and, Natasha and her mother had taught several smaller women's courses. And I was like, we need to collab on like a big women's course, like the women's course. And we call it the biological woman, so the woman who is deeply rooted in the 5 biological laws and understands and knows all of the adaptations related to really all the organs, but the female organs in particular. And so we designed a course that's over 11 weeks. We go into week by week, each of the systems, each of the biological programs, each of the adaptations, and we give women this map for what they need to know to navigate their experience with this brilliant wisdom, so that they don't have to be afraid of what's going on with their skin or their breasts or their uterus. They know exactly where to go, what conflict is at play, and what needs to be resolved. And, Natasha does a beautiful job of weaving in family constellation work for, so it's like a lot of the question is, okay, well, what do you do about it? And we look at your lineage and your ancestry and what you're carrying. And so it's a beautiful blend of learning kind of the practical knowledge, wisdom, 5 biological laws. And then also what do you do? How do I shift this? How do I shift my attitude, my perspective of this? How do I change what's going on in my world? We look at, so week by week, we go through, we talk about constellations, we talk about the hormone status and how it comes from the brain and the different tracks related to, so if a woman is dealing with mood swings, we just chalk it up as, oh, it's just hormonal. She's just hormonal. She just has mood swings. Well, why does she have mood swings? Why does she go super manic or super depressive? Or why does she flip-flop in a way that's
I think every male in the universe would like you to answer that question right now, please, Melissa. Why do women have mood swings?
And it's the woman that needs to know. She needs to understand. And so many relationships and marriages have fallen apart because women don't know this knowledge, because she doesn't understand how her perspective shifts when she's pregnant and when she's breastfeeding, and how that changes the way that she interacts with her man. And so this, this course really, it's for women to deep dive, get a handle on understanding why she is the way she is and how she can modify, change, evolve beyond the current conflicts and symptom loops that she's in, so she can experience an expanded life and reach her fullest potential. But so many of us, because we don't know this, We are stuck in self-devaluation. We're stuck in these, these conflicts because we haven't yet learned the lesson and gone on to, transmute whatever it is that happened to us in a way that serves us, it serves our family, serves our children. We really want young women who are planning to become mothers to learn this, because that really is how do we change the paradigm? It's not by tearing down the old system. It's by planting the seeds in the new, in the young, so that these children, they know from the beginning what a cough is, what a cold is, where their symptoms come from.
It was discussed a lot in the GNM community of how do we bring this knowledge and wisdom forth? And Hammer's idea was, if one person in your family system knows this very well, and you have that one person you could go to when something arises who can pass down this knowledge onto you, that is the way that we create the change. And I think we know that the family system, creating a sovereign family unit is the biggest revolution we can do. And just like German New Medicine has laws, there's laws of harmony within the family unit as well. And, the first law that Bert Hellinger talked about is that your relationship with your mother is your relationship with life. So when you come onto this earth, you have to cry for the attention of your mother so that she will come feed you, so that she will come nourish you, so that you can survive. So that is the mirror of how much you will take the zest, the joie de vivre out of life, how much you will live in alignment with life is a direct mirror of your relationship with the mother. And the mother knows all. She's the ultimate healer. She knows the story of before you came to this earth, why you came to this earth, and your journey of this earth. So the more you can embody, that lineage, the more embodied we become.
Yeah. What do you think's obviously people that are drawn to both of you and join your course, are of a certain mindset, they understand this work, they probably came across you social media. But what are the biggest challenges that you think the modern woman is facing in today's world?
I think a lot of women are, trying to find their partner. They're trying to get into a solid relationship and to be in that relationship in a joyful way. And I think that so many struggles come, when women, and obviously because of the big lie of feminism that we've been sold, and the model for, what is womanhood, and the things that we observed and watched growing up, the kind of the idiot man and the do-it-all woman, and this dynamic that was modeled by people's parents, and also just by television, and just by, again, what we grow up seeing. Oh, this is how it is. And the woman who feels like she's got to do it all, that she is strong and capable and powerful, and she can, do anything that a man can do, that doesn't honor the trueness of the biology of what how nature kind of designed the family unit to be. And understanding the roles and understanding the biological, just even the fact that the woman has small hands, the man has big hands. And, the woman is smaller and the man is bigger and he's stronger. It's like when you recognize this isn't simply philosophy. This isn't simply, we think that girls play with dolls, and boys play with trucks. We are told that, that's just a stereotype. But no, it's not. That the woman being interested in dolls, and raising babies, that's her biology. That's not a gender role that we pushed on her and said, oh, you have to like pink, you have to like dolls, and boys, it's like, well, no, it makes sense for the boy to be interested in machinery, and to be interested in the dump truck, and and it's not that children can't have multiple interests, and it's not that parents need to freak out if their kids are interested in things that don't seem to, align to their gender role. It's simply understanding that there is a there. There is a biological reason for the way that men are and the way that women are. And because the lines have gotten crossed, and, a lot of agendas and different, confusing women and getting them in the workforce, and helping them to believe that it's so important that I that being a mother is kind of like a lowly job, or simply being a stay-at-home mom or taking care of kids doesn't seem as bright and shiny and glamorous as, living in the working world, and how, and it's not simply that we want to encourage women to, be trad wives. It's that we want them to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Well, understand, does this make sense? Does this make sense biologically? Does this make sense for the ultimate happiness and health and well-being of my children? A lot of women, well-meaning women, have, made life choices and decisions regarding their children that if they were understanding things from the biological perspective, meaning the life-enhancing perspective, the best upbringing for the child, she would have made different decisions. And our whole teaching is about, it's not about guilt or shame or feeling bad about your choices. It's about, let's learn the biological map and let's start living, closer and closer in alignment with how nature has said, this is the best way. This is the best way to raise the healthy children so that they don't have, because mothers with young children who have a lot of conflicts, who have a lot of symptoms, and where does she run off? She runs off to the pediatrician. She runs off to try to find the solutions when she is the solution. Mothers are the solution to their children's health and well-being, and fathers are the solution to the woman's health and well-being. And so it's through understanding this biological hierarchy and order that we can come into the health and harmony that everyone is trying so desperately to seek.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that.
Now a short break from the episode.
Hope you're enjoying this episode. We have an exciting announcement to make. I know many have been waiting in the wings for this. The 12th round of our 10-week self-development group coaching program, Rise Above the Herd, is now on pre-sale. And it'll all be on pre-sale until the 31st of January of this month. And there's unique benefits to signing up during the pre-sale period, which is, number one, you get a one-on-one call with Erasmus and myself, an hour-long call, something which we practically never offer. But yeah, you can get personalized insights to prepare you for the program and build a strong foundation to really set you up for success inside Wrath. And the other unique bonus that pre-sale enrollments get is you get an annual membership to our membership community, Friends of the Truth, which is of incredible value. I mean, it's 5 live calls a month for an entire year, plus the vaults, plus access to us. And so for those that don't know, a quick synopsis of Rise Above the Herd, basically, are you living authentically or are you not? Can you be living more authentically? Can you be showing up more expressive, more of who you are? Can you build more psychological maturity? Can you have more psychological wholeness? Can you know yourself and love yourself on a deeper level, which will permeate and ripple into every single aspect of your life? I mean, the social proof that we have for this program is now incredible. And thank you to all our past graduates for being so generous in your feedback as well. Everything you need to know, hereforthetruth.com/wrath, RATH. You can learn more and sign up and benefit from what's available during the pre-sale period. All right, guys, hope you're enjoying this episode. We're not mentioning Wrath again in the outro. So if you're keen, please take note and hopefully see you inside.
Back to the episode.
Yeah, as you guys know, I've got 3 daughters now. So there's 4 women in my life. And I can't exactly confirm with the youngest yet because she's 6 weeks, but the obsession with unicorns and mermaids seems to be pretty pervasive. So what's the explanation for that?
Well, I would say estrogen, right? So the feminine hormone of estrogen is that real femininity, right? So unicorns, it's like, or fairies or all these things. It's all of those like elemental beings. We could even look at it as like our constellations, right? If you're a little bit post-mortal. So if you're raised by a little bit even more spiritual parents who are really into what happens on the other side, then you might be like, okay, fairies and unicorns and all this fantasy. But I think women are emotional. So fantasy is emotional. Mm-hmm. And also we have this beautiful notion of like, if we really look at ourselves as women, we really do want an emotional relationship. So men are much more logical, right? They're much more about procreation and protection. I want to go out, prove myself through my duties and my honor. I want to accumulate resources so I can get a territory, and then I will have a woman. She will become my territory, and I will start a family. So he's all about honor and duty. But women, we want that, emotional experience, to care, to nurture, right? And we are playful. So even what, Melissa was talking about when you asked her, what's the sort of plague of the modern day woman? I like to call it in my practice, the denial of motherhood. So if we look strictly biological, the biological value of the female is she is the creative life force. She is the birther. She brings spirit into matter, and that is her ultimate purpose. So her biological value is her sexuality, is that femininity. That is her value. She has a cycle that is in harmony with nature, right? The true cycle of the female is 28 days, exactly in alignment with our lunar cycle, the moon, in harmony with the cosmos. And if she understands this, she knows that everything in her biology, her hormones are all communicating to ensure her pregnancy. Like literally, we're attracted to a man. We're excreting through our glands. We're communicating on this biochemical level so that we will jump into bed with each other, fall in love, and have babies. And we've denied this and suppressed this aspect of ourselves as women, that our superpower is this creative life force energy, and that we have a biological motivation to procreate. So already, if you're looking at a female who says, no, I've never had a desire for babies, or I've never even thought about that, I know there's a conflict there, because we have oxytocin, we have serotonin, I'm secreting estrogen, he's getting fired up with testosterone, all so that we can procreate. If women didn't have an innate instinct to desire babies, this species would have never survived. So what women need to understand is that there is this innate power within us, and it is.
Can I jump in there? So does it end at our biology though? Like, does our biology simply dictate everything, or is there like a metaphysical or a maybe a karmic aspect or a consciousness aspect where it's like, sure, I understand my biology, I understand these urges and desires, but I actually don't feel like kids are for me in this lifetime? Or is it an absolute that you believe that there's a conflict presence if a woman doesn't want to have kids at this point or in this life?
Yeah, I would say that, that there is a biological reason. There isn't simply like the metaphysical reason would be I had a sexual conflict and a territorial loss conflict, and, I am post-mortal, or I am, hyper spiritual, or I no longer am interested in the things of the body. It was because life was too conflicting, that too much happened. And nature said, so even that does make sense. It makes sense if a person is in that state, because for them, in their experience, in their life, and the psyche has gotten the message, it's not safe. It is not safe to bring in children this time around, And so I'm gonna rely on, other lives and other lifetimes to do that. But that always there's not, that doesn't happen for no reason. So that isn't simply a person's path in life. The path in life in nature says, more life, please, more life, please. Let's play the game of life. And if a person doesn't have that drive, or, has hesitation around that, it's because their psyche learned through probably the way that they were raised and their own parents that this isn't safe. This is not the thing I want to do, because it's scary. And my biology, and some women who maybe are having difficulties conceiving, it's because there's something that is a track for them, that their body is being reminded either the man isn't safe, or I'm not going to be a good mother, I'm not feminine enough, or, something about the circumstances are not right for me to bring new life into this world. But biologically, that always is going to be the case. Nature's always going to want to bring new life into the world.
Yeah. So just to confirm, and correct me if I've misinterpreted, you don't think there's any scenario where a woman doesn't want to have kids where it's not related to her not feeling safe having kids?
Okay. So for me, biology is very spiritual in and of itself. So we would say from the spiritual aspect, right? My life experiences, what I've gone through, have made me who we are, right, have made me who I am. And maybe on some level before I came here, I chose my path, right? I chose to have all these experiences to become the person who I am. Yeah. So now we look at German New Medicine, where we can see all the conflicts that you've experienced at the brain level that have created biological adaptations. And we could look at that as the blueprint of who you are. I see the life experiences and the conflicts that you went through in your life that made you who you were and adapted your body in the way that it did. So if you look at the female biology now, right, she has a cycle, so she ovulates. Okay, so once a month, whether you like it or not, if you're a female, you're going through a cycle and you're ovulating. Why are you ovulating? To get pregnant. So if I don't have a motivation to get pregnant, there must be a reason why. And of course, that reason why, so you went through an experience, you went through a conflict, right? Probably a sexual frustration. That's the conflict of the circumstances for procreation are not available to me. So if my father walks out the door and I don't have a man to protect and provide for me and take care of me, and I've just been taught to not trust men, well, circumstances for procreation are not available to me. If I'm with a man, but he's immature and I don't trust him to protect me or provide for me, and I don't think he could be a good father, I can't even envision him as the father of my child, well, circumstances for procreation are not available to me. If I'm a single woman and I have to go work by myself and make money and take care of myself and no one's coming to save me and no man is coming to help me, well, whether I like it or not, circumstances for procreation are not available to me. And we're living in harmony with our body. So as I'm having this experience through the psyche, my body in synchronistic tandem is also adapting to what I'm going through. So yes, there's always an underlying issue there. Now, is it wrong for a woman not to want to have children? Absolutely not. And actually, we would say in the family constellations, when you stand in your truth and in your power and you say, okay, no, I have chosen this. I'm taking radical responsibility for the path that I've chosen not to procreate.
Yeah.
And I have value in other ways and other aspects. Then you stand in your truth of who we are.
Yeah.
But for the female, she gets to have the opportunity to resolve these conflicts, to look at the life experiences that she had that got her here, and she gets to remember her true female power when she owns that.
Thank you. I really appreciate the passion as well. Yeah. I just obviously, I become curious, like if there are circumstances and case studies where women have had every need met by their fathers, they have amazing men in their lives to provide and protect, and they ovulate, and like there might be a biological desire to get pregnant, but there's just like a metaphysical or a conscious choice where it's like, yeah, this ain't for me right now. I'm just curious. That's all. Yeah.
Real quickly, because we brought it up earlier, and I know we may have touched on it in previous episodes, but I want to kind of just explore it here. Can you just talk about constellations real quickly, what they are?
And probably delineate, because we've been talking about family constellation.
Yes.
Good point. Yeah. So family constellations, like Natasha mentioned, is a system of understanding the order of the family, as described by Bert Hellinger. And constellations are a discovery of Dr. Hammer, which is where there are two conflicts on opposite sides of the brain. And basically, it's like when lightning strikes twice. And so we have one conflict on one side and another conflict on the other side, and that shifts the personality of the individual, and they now have a behavioral change. Basically, it's like it's overload of the system. Like the biology is adapting with one conflict, and then, whoa, this conflict's unresolved, and the psyche is hit with another conflict. And so instead of continuing to run all of these organ adaptation biological programs, because that would be very metabolically expensive for the brain and for the organs, what happens is there's a shift. And so this is where what's so-called mental illness, right? So that's how conventional medicine, you're mentally ill, you're bipolar, you're schizophrenic, you are, manic, you're depressive, you're autistic, you're hypersexual, all of these things come from. So when someone's like, their behavior's a little off or they're acting a little wacky, that person, they seem crazy. right? Or, oh, one day she just went crazy. Or, when my teenager started her period, she went crazy for a couple of months. Constellation. And so when the constellation occurs, that immediately shifts the behavior of that person. And once that point on, there are now tracks. And so the person, if they can be happy-go-lucky one day and then just totally won't even leave their room the next day, it's because they are encountering tracks related to their biological conflicts that are running in constellation. So a lot of times it can be, I have a sexual conflict related to, my absent father. And then I have, a territorial loss conflict related to my mother. And then when I'm around my mother, I'm really depressed. When I'm around my father, I get really manic. And so that person, when they understand their constellations, we can start to navigate and operate within them. A lot of times our constellations, especially from early childhood, they're difficult to resolve because it's like, how do you unsee, someone who flashed you at the park, and then you unsee it. Wow, I feel very unsafe in my body, in my sexuality, because, someone came and did something abusive to me. So once these things happen, it's not that they can't be resolved, because people do resolve constellations, but often they do kind of end up being a feature of your personality that you learn to work with and operate within. The different constellations are different combinations. So the sexual conflict and the territorial loss conflict becomes the nymphomania constellation, or the Casanova constellation. The scare fright conflict, along with the territorial anger conflict, becomes the autistic constellation. And so all these different manifestations of mental illness or neurodiversity, it's actually a constellation. It's specific combinations of conflicts that occur in the brain.
From a GM standpoint, or Dr. Hammer's point of view, is your personality solely based on conflicts, or is there like an essence of a being that comes in and that's already there? Like, you can sometimes see personalities within kids that are like completely different, very, very, very young. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, there is a quote from Hammer that says your personality is the sum total of your conflicts, so that it is shaped. So, I mean, how can you even separate the two? Because everything from the time that you are conceived, your mother's experience, whether she, wanted you to be a boy instead of a girl, or a girl instead of a boy, what was going on in her life, how she was being treated, what happened during her birth, all of these things are already shaping you. If you had a territorial anger conflict because, the doctor pulled you really hard out, tugged on your head when he was pulling you out of the womb, and you have a territorial anger, how is that not going to affect your personality? So I don't even think that you could, it's not like it's possible for a being to come in without these physical experiences that then shape the way that they see the world. So I think it's just one and the same. I think that, the person that is experiencing it is going to be influenced in some way by all of those little things that have happened to them.
Right. And your story of the womb, don't want to interrupt.
Go.
Even when you're in utero, your story of the journey of, why your parents conceived you, how that your parents conceived you, and your story in utero of all the things that happened, like, you're also taking in that information into shaping who you are at the same time. So all of those things are significant. And even I really love the work of Joel Schaefer, who says, ask your parents your conception story. Like, were you conceived out of a dumb, bored F-U-C-K? Like, were your parents just bored and rolled over one night and conceived you? Because he noticed, like, with his clients, through working with a person at the soul spiritual level, that made such an impact, just how they were conceived. And you have to remember, Hammer himself, he was really interested in studying different religions, ancient civilizations, what was going on with the tribes, but he wanted to be recognized by the medical industry. So as much as he would have had his personal beliefs of things that he was interested in and looking into, he wanted this to be acknowledged by the medical community. So he wasn't going to go, so far into the spirituality of it. But that's where we can come in and integrate that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I'm thinking about, like, even from an astrological standpoint, like, are you a blank slate, like, once you're conceived, or even from an astrological standpoint, or any one of these other systems that take the cosmos into account, like, are you more prone to certain conflicts based on, your astrology, or does something carry over from a previous life? Anyways, these are just things to contemplate.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, just based on what I've heard, it's like, yeah, maybe it's a great at describing nuances in the outer personality, but like, where does like the psychic being that one is, kind of come into the picture? Of course, the circumstances of our life, of our upbringing, the things that happen, the situations, the conflicts are going to affect how we're morphed and how we communicate, on an outer personality level. But yeah, I think my query is, where does the psychic being kind of come in that? Anyway.
I think it's all one thing, really. I mean, so
Yeah.
I think that, well, what if all of that is organized? So the being that comes and chooses to come in, when at this specific astrological moment, right?
Is there a part of you that can't be affected by that? Is what I'm saying. Is there a part of you that can't be impacted by that? That's not going to be morphed by that. That knows something beyond that.
That can't be morphed by your conflicts?
Yeah, of course. That can't be morphed by these experiences. Like, is there a part of you that exists behind that? You know what I mean?
I mean, there's just consciousness. So consciousness in and of itself is the observer that's observing all of this stuff going on, but the physical organism, if a physical organism has a territorial anger conflict, it's going to manifest the adaptation that is associated with that. So I don't think that we are immune. I think that when we come into the physical world and the physical realm, we are affected by the biological laws. Like, you come in and you're part of this physical world, and there are laws that this realm is governed by. And so you're not exempt from those laws. But consciousness, obviously, it's sitting back and watching the whole show the whole time.
Yeah. And the metaphysical law of like consciousness shapes our reality, so that would be also mirroring in the 5 biological laws of nature, is that like this conflict, this experience that I went through is causing my matter to adapt to the experience in the best way possible. So I would say it's all one. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. We are just the mirror of nature. And that just kind of depends on like how big of a bird's eye view you zoom out,
Yeah, for sure.
I've heard it said before that in G&M that like there's certain conflicts that you can't resolve after a certain age. So how does that play into all this, especially in like relational dynamics? And let's say like a woman is like way more masculine and a man is way more feminine, but then we're like looking at like how to live biologically, and it's kind of opposite. Like, how does that play out in partnership? You know what I mean?
Partnership about the conflicts you can't resolve.
Well, both. Like, let's say, a woman is more masculine, and then like, can she do things to change that, or is she just going to pretend to be feminine and into unicorns and all this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, how does that work out in like relational dynamics? Like, let's say someone's in their 30s and their 40s, and like the base of their personality is a certain way. Like, they may not change and become this like uber feminine, receptive female.
Well, if I can frame it another way, is the panacea for every woman to become more biological from a G&M perspective? Is that kind of helpful?
I don't know. I don't know what you said, but based on what I said, let me know your thoughts, ladies.
Okay, so from the way I understand what you're saying, Erasmus, is like, if we're looking at the constellations, we have something called a maturity stop, right? So that's when I'm in the temporal lobe, which is the brain area right above the ear, and I've got constellations. So I've got 2 conflicts, right? 1 in each brain hemisphere. And so now if I don't resolve that before the age of 25, right, before the age of my brain development, I am at the emotional maturity of the age in which this constellation occurred, right? So that is my emotional intelligence, and it's a gift, right? It keeps us young, it keeps us youthful, it keeps us playful. And on the extreme level, right, it can keep someone very emotionally stunted, which we see as well. Now, for the female, she has a beautiful way of sort of lightening that load, is before the age of 25, for every pregnancy that she comes to full term, will add on 3 years to that emotional maturity. So In nature, the female would be getting pregnant as soon as she experiences her first menarche, which is that first occurrence of menstruation. So the female kind of has the time to catch up and gain maturity so that she can raise her offspring as best as possible. So there is that biological aspect of it. But the way I like to look at it is this is about lightening the load. So it's not about, getting into the so-called healing. I have to heal this. I have to fix myself, X, Y, and Z. But it's about, okay, I'm bringing to awareness, right, that I've had these conflicts and I'm going to lighten the load of them. Yeah. In GNM, we call that downgrading them. So remember, the intensity of the conflict is always equivalent to the intensity of the symptom. So the more extreme change in mental behavior I have, the more extreme trauma or conflicts I experienced. Yeah. So what it really comes down to is the more I integrate this into my experience, the less of the load, the less of the extreme change in mental behavior I'm going to have. So for the female, the more she comes back into that safety of her femininity, right? The more she resolves those sexual conflicts that she experienced that didn't make her feel safe, that drove her out of her feminine biology. The more I get back into that, the more I downgrade and resolve those, the more it actually, like a scale, lightens the load and estrogen increases again. Yeah. Her cycle will actually change. So when the female is really aware of this work, she can actually track her menstrual cycle and actually know when she has resolved her sexual conflicts. And for the man, same thing. Like the more the female initiates her partner into his masculinity, the more his testosterone goes up, right? Or the more a man proves himself in society and accumulates a territory. I mean, you guys are men, so I'm sure you've been through that hero's journey, right? The more his testosterone is going up. So we become like the direct reflection of each other. And if we have awareness in our relationships, we can really, as I think Laura Doyle says, we can kiss the frog and turn him into a prince, yeah? Or, turn a lot of princes into frogs, so to speak. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I love you men, yeah? And I think we all deserve more masculine men, yeah?
Yeah, and when you're, and getting to that place where I want to express myself and it's not thinking, oh, I'm bad because I had all these conflicts and now I'm learning about GNM and I'm 45 and, I'm like, how do I undo this and how do I fix it? It's simply, it's moving more in the direction of thinking, oh, what would it be like if I was more, more masculine or more feminine, not like this is good and how it should be and I'm bad and wrong because of my conflicts. And a lot of people can do that to themselves as they learn this information and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm not masculine enough. Oh, I'm not feminine enough. Oh, this is bad. This is wrong. I need to change. I need to be different. And they come from it, rather than an optimization. It's like, oh, now I'm understanding that this was an adaptation, and am I interested in shifting, my perspective of that? Am I interested in downgrading? Am I interested in, seeing what would it be like if? And certainly, so there are conflicts that you may never resolve, you may be able to downgrade and shift your perspective of them, but, the radical, oh, I'm all of a sudden going to get a territory, even though I've never had a territory my whole life, that might, certain things could cause a constellation. Or if you come out of constellation and you resolve something, the constellations do protect us. And so we want to see these as super senses. They are superpowers. They are the super way that the brain keeps us safe when we've had an overload of conflict. And so that's why really it's that navigation within it. It's optimizing my own experience. It's not going into looking at yourself as less than or bad or wrong. It's simply, oh, now that I know this, how can I optimize? How can I operate within this for more peace and harmony and self-expression, and living to my highest potential, and so be careful. People, if you take this and you think feminine is good and masculine is good, and if I'm opposite of what I should be, then I'm bad and I'm wrong. Yeah. Your mind is playing trick on you, right? Like your mind is taking the information and using it to hurt you. That's where you need self-awareness and say, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to do what makes sense. And it makes sense to optimize my gifts and optimize and work within what I'm working with and not seek to necessarily, I need to upheave my whole entire life in order to be okay. That's not necessary at all.
Yeah, no, you answered my questions because that's what I was concerned about. Sometimes things can get very dogmatic, black and white. And then again, like people come across this knowledge and they're like, but I'm not that. Like, what does that mean? And then they get maybe the self-evaluation conflict from that. And who knows? But yeah, no, there's definitely nuance to this. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I mean, there's some seemingly very healthy and thriving relationships where the woman holds the masculine side of the pole and the man holds the feminine side of the pole, you know?
yeah. Yeah, and that would be, they're mirroring each other's constellations, right? You get like
Yeah.
if you're the nympho, you get the Casanova, you get your opposite of the constellation. But
Yeah.
Erasmus, I think you just you pointed out something that's really important about the dogma, because one of through my experience of just being raised on this, I never overthought things like that. Like it's not like my mom was telling me what the harmonious biological age of having your first period, and when I didn't get it at that age, she's like, oh, you have this like my mother never did that to me. I never learned it from studying it, where you shouldn't be taking this information and now getting in more fear of like hypochondriac of the conflicts that I experienced. And that's one theme that like I've been noticing as people have fallen into this work, where I'm like, whoa, yeah, don't use it this way. And it's such an unnatural way of integrating it too, because like if you look at this work as the harmony of nature and then you integrate it like this, it's not in alignment. And so if you integrate it through your own experience and just chill out, and also understand it's not about curing a symptom. Like I have things that I go through biologically that I consider like my themes in life. If I look at the kidney collecting tubules, like abandonment conflict of like feeling abandoned, sometimes feeling like a fish out of water, like a refugee. Like I've been through things in my life where that's a little bit part of my story. And when I get triggered in my abandonment, like I start to hold on to water, and I'm not trying to immediately cure that about myself. I understand that's a theme of my life that comes up for me, and it's a part of who I am. And same thing with this sexual frustration, like I'm not at that phase of my life where, I'm married and having babies. So I understand that's a theme for me, and I work through that. So I think, using it wisely is so crucial.
Yeah.
Also understanding it's not a magic wand.
Well, no. And this is where I think psychology comes into place too, because if you have a huge like perfectionist part of you or inner critic part of you, you come across new knowledge or new material. And then it's just more fuel for that critical part of you, that's going to beat you up. Oh my God, G&M, why did you get a symptom? And it's like, it's not about this perfection. It's about a greater awareness and greater understanding and more peace based on that understanding.
Precisely. Yeah. You are taking this information. Steve calls it grabbing the information by the blade instead of the handle. You take this and you are hurting yourself with it. That's where we need to, kind of zoom back. And that's why, I like to have people go through awareness school, because it's like that helps you to just really understand how you're operating your mind. Because if your mind is still operating you, and your mind, takes information and beats you up with it and say, oh, well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that, and you had a symptom. Oh, and G&M, people are going to think that you, are stupid because you got a symptom. And it's like, absolutely not. That you need to recognize that your mind is walking all over you instead of zooming out and saying, oh, what's the most useful way to interact with this information? That's your job. What is the most useful way to interact with this information to optimize and to bring about the most peace and to set myself free? If it's not bringing me peace and if it's not setting me free, I'm not interacting with it in a resourceful way. And that is on me. I need to see, how does my mind by default, a lot of people have patterns, default patterns, and self-devaluation and the stuff that's happened, right, makes that more difficult, right? If you've got a lot of self-devaluation, you've got a pattern in there that will see everything through the lens of self-devaluation. Oh, this is why you're broken. This is why you suck. This is why you're bad. This is why you're wrong. This is why you're not going to get what you want. But again, awareness helps you to see, oh, there's that self-devaluation pattern talking. Am I going to take that to heart? Am I going to make that the loudest voice in my head? Am I going to live my life according to what the self-devaluation thought? Well, why is that thought even there? Oh, well, when I was a kid, I was bullied, and people, and so, okay, so because someone did something that they shouldn't do, to me, I took that, I internalized it. I now see everything through the lens of being bad and wrong and not cool enough or interesting or good, and people don't like me. And it's like, oh, awareness helps you to ping, ping, ping. Oh, I see why I feel this way. I see why a part of my mind is attuned to perceiving information in this way. Awareness is the thing that helps you to see it all. When I can see it all, then I take it in and say, okay, given all this, what's the most resourceful path forward? What is the best way that I can think about this? What's uplifting, right? What helps me to feel more confident and more secure? What helps me to live in alignment? How is this, this conflict, this thing that's coming up, how is it showing me where I'm out of alignment? Where I'm not living my highest truth, where I'm not living in alignment with my values. It's like, you know what? I actually did something that I don't really feel good about doing that. Maybe that's what this is here to show me. And so when you're in that space of awareness, and that's why it's when a person comes across this that doesn't have those tools for inner guidance and that awareness to understand how their mind is interacting with information, it actually can be worse for them than not knowing GNM at all, honestly, because again, they use it in a way that is destructive instead of constructive.
Well said. Natasha, anything to add to that?
No, I completely agree. It makes me laugh because, gosh, like when you're in this community, it's so funny. Like someone said the other day, oh, I think this really triggered me because I run KCT. And so like this is like abandonment. And I just thought that was so funny. I was like, oh, okay. And like on one aspect, that's really great and enlightening. And the other aspect is like, are we labeling ourselves now?
Yeah.
Like, are we diagnosing ourselves? Or I had someone come to me and they're like, oh, my friend studies this and like, apparently I'm a nympho and I'm a this and I'm a that. And I'm like, oh boy, like, it's not about, pointing the fingers and becoming the diagnostic person. And I have this with my mom, because we have a really beautiful relationship together. But if I notice that, she's teetering on that edge, I'll just sort of kick her under the table or sort of say like, Mom, like downgrade. She used to say that to me as a child too, downgrade, Natasha. So we sort of, we can catch each other when we notice these aspects about ourselves. And when we notice we're starting to get down the path of that dogma, because it can be a little bit of that victimization again.
Yeah. Well, we see it even in, let's say, more allopathic. Oh, I have this disease. I have this thing. And the same thing could be applied to GNM. Like, I have this conflict. This is why X, Y, Z. I have this conflict, even if people in astrology, well, it's because I'm a Capricorn. This is why I do these things. So
I feel like that's more likely. Like a person displays that more often, in my observation, when they really haven't gone deep in the matter or deep in the material. It's almost like they just watched a couple of podcasts, done some surface level things, watched a YouTube video on a specific conflict, and then it's like all of a sudden they think, they know it all.
Yeah. Surface level understanding. It's like, and that's why true understanding, you just have compassion and understanding for everything. Like when you have that, there is no finger pointing, there's no blaming, there's no labeling, there's no, it's simply, it's compassion. It's love. When you understand it deeply enough, it's just pure love. It's like, wow, I get it. It makes sense that I am the way that I am. It makes sense that you are the way that you are right now, right? Because things are changeable, things are morphable, things are transmutable. It's like, but I get it and I understand. And so there isn't condescension internally or externally. It's simply like when the depth of understanding is there, the purity of love and compassion, it can't help but come out because it's just this like all seeing, like if I knew your whole life story, everything about your behavior, even if I'm like, oh, you're a narcissist, oh, you're antisocial, oh, you're this, oh, you're that. It's like, oh, I see why. I understand why. It makes sense that you behave in this really off-putting and terrible way, actually. It makes sense that you treat people like this or scream or explode. It's like, I get it. You've got a megalomania constellation, which is like when you see what is a instead of saying, oh, you have a megalomania constellation, it's like, oh, you have a megalomania constellation. Someone you were devalued and then you were devalued again.
That sounds
right?
That sounds more gaslighting than the other one. It's like, oh, I understand. You have a megalomania constellation. I get it. Yeah.
This is how I feel like every day with Joel. I just have so much compassion for him, knowing I'm like, oh, what did you go through as a child for you to become who you are today? I have such compassion for you, brother.
Thank you.
You guys are so silly. But yes, I get it. And when you understand it, it's like, this makes sense, and a person.
There's less of a charge. There's less of a
Personal
charge, I think.
responsibility for, and that's the thing is and that's the thing that's difficult for the narcissist to even see, because they would have to say, oh, wow, I've had an identity conflict and a territorial anger, and that causes me to lash out and be really unloving to the people that I claim to care about. And when I'm triggered, I can be the biggest monster to the people that I love. Can I recognize that? And can I, have that self-forgiveness and self-awareness to take ownership? I have to take self-responsibility for my behavior. And I know that I have the power to change this, to downgrade this through awareness. And so, yeah, that's like one of the toughest journeys, I think, for a person to see, the stuff that they've done that have impacted people in a way that has been harmful to others, but that also is, if you're ready to see it, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, I think, Joel, you had a great post the other day that I so resonated with about how, in the truth community, there are these people who have spread the truth for so long. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they're completely, their mental health and the way in which they're expressing themselves is so not in alignment with that. And so if you look at constellations and the megalomania and the aggressive constellations, all these conflicts that we experience, they make us have the ability to stand up and spread this truth and have a platform. That takes a certain constellation. And then the flip side of it is and how does that constellation express itself through its shadow?
Yeah. I mean, there's gifts and shadows to the constellations, I guess, for many people, they probably reached their success in their life through being so hell-bent on a certain path, which is probably triggered by a constellation. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. I have a question. This may be answerable, may not be answerable. If it's not, just ignore me. That's fine. Maybe through GNM or maybe even with family constellations, is there a reason why people conceive a certain gender? Is there any explanation for why certain genders might come through biologically or, through family constellations work or anything else?
Yes,
I'm trying to explain three daughters. I'm trying to explain three daughters to myself right here. So.
Oh, that I have heard, certain things about the masculinity of the father, or, I've heard things, but I don't know if there's any true, I haven't seen anything from Hammer, as far as a biological explanation for that. But I would imagine there certainly has to be.
You're saying why someone gives birth to a female versus a male? Is that what you're saying?
That's my question. Is there any kind of tangible something that we can, look at for that?
Well, in the family constellations in Hellinger's work, he talks about something called the sphere of influence. So in the orders of love in a harmonious family system, the female will be under the sphere of influence of her mother, and the male will be under the sphere of influence of his father. So when the female is under the sphere of influence of the mother, she learns about femininity through her mother. And so she gets to rise into her femininity through being in her mother's sphere of influence. Likewise, the father would show his son what it means to be a man in the world. And when you look at the family system and those are off, so let's say maybe, you're a female, but you've been under the sphere of influence of your father. So he's told you, you have to be masculine, or you have to prove yourself, or you have to have duties and honor and X, Y, and Z. She can become more masculine because she's more in her father's sphere of influence. And when a male is under the sphere of influence of the mother, he becomes more feminine because he's constantly looking for the approval of his mother. And so she teaches him to be feminine. And then he becomes, under that sphere of influence. So we would look at it in the family system of what happened to you, Joel, in your family system that caused you to need to have girls. Okay. So maybe
my brother has 4 daughters only. I've got 3 daughters only. So there's probably something through this.
Something in your ancestry where women were not protected. So you're rewriting this. It's the job of the father to protect the femininity. So you're rewriting the script by having this, beautiful privilege of being a father figure. It could be in the past that maybe, there's women were under the sphere of influence, the sphere of influences were off. And so even, your beautiful wife might have a cycle breaker of she has to teach women how to be in their femininity. So we look at it in the family constellations of there's some healing that needs to be done in the feminine. And we also have the orders of love, which are really beautiful, where a father shows his love for his daughters by the way in which he loves his wife.
Mhm.
So when the father honors the wife, protects her, provides for her, it trickles down through that beautiful family pyramid to his daughters. And she's shown the love of her father by the way he loves his wife. And the same thing, the sons are shown the way their mother loves them by how she loves and honors her husband. So it might just be something where, you've had some deep, intense family ancestry with women, and now you get to heal that.
Yeah, I feel there's definitely something purposeful, something designed, in it, of course, for sure. Yeah. Is it Hellinger? He's German as well, right? So we're dealing with two German systems. So shout out to
Germans.
Shout out to the great German thinkers, for sure. How else do you guys kind of blend these systems in your work? What are some of the other primary or key ways that Family Constellations comes in and complements GNM?
Yeah, well, when we work with women, the significance of women, it's all about the nest. So the more she can harmonize and understand the family systems and incorporate them, the more she can achieve harmony and bring forth harmony. So I think in that aspect, it's really helpful. And in the other aspect that it's helpful is so many of our conflicts and tracks and triggers come from, the conflicts that we experienced within our family of origin. And so really healing that and bringing that into awareness is really crucial. And it's about taking each person in full. So when we merge our mother and our father within ourselves, we can finally start to take ourselves in full. And that's that same aspect of GNM of like, I'm taking radical responsibility for my health. I find it all syncs up with one another. And especially when we know that the symptoms get accentuated with our tracks and triggers, if I can work with a client and I can illuminate something and I'm like, oh, isn't that an interesting pattern? And I can like sort of dissect their family and show how their family is mirroring their current experience. Then they're like, whoa, okay, yeah, I've repeated a pattern unconsciously that I haven't been aware of. Because I always like to say, the equivalent level of the symptom is the equivalent level of your own denial. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. So the more we can bring it into the forefront, the better.
Nice. Yeah, it's pretty awesome when you're able to like see these correlations and see how different amazing systems can kind of come together and complement each other to provide like even greater benefit. Like I love that.
Yeah. That said, I wanted to bring up like, are there hardcore GNM purists that like are just like, you cannot integrate systems, it's GNM only? And is that part of maybe some of the infighting that maybe occurs with like this?
What conflicts are those purists experiencing?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of territorialness. There's a lot of, and I think there's a well-meaning heart in a lot of it. Is that Dr. Hammer in his experience, it's like when people water down the information or if they distort the information, it's easy for it to lose its biological roots and origin. And so that's why, like Natasha said before, it's like this is a biological, this is a natural science, and so that's. Natural science is natural science. It's kind of this is the way that it works, that every organ is a perfect idea and it has a perfect biological function and it's correlated to a specific conflict that person experienced in their lifetime. But they have to have the DHS. They have to have the impact in the brain in order for this symptom to express in the organ level. It always psyche, brain, organ, first biological law. This is the iron rule. It's always like that. And so the thing, when people are like, and bring in ancestry and past lives and all of that, that takes, and while that can be playing that bigger role, the individual on this plane at this time had to experience the conflict shock in their brain in order for the symptoms to manifest. And I think that, if we get if that gets too watered down and we're like, oh, well, this is just something from a past life and it wasn't a conflict you had, it was somebody else's conflict, then that again, we have to be able to look at it and measure it on the CT scan, see the impact in the brain. And so, but the thing is I think that both can exist at the same time, where it was ancestral and it did come down through the family line, and you did experience it in your own way once your physical form came into being, right? And how could you not? Because the unresolved stuff of the grandparents, they are incubating a child in the environment of their unresolved stuff. And then those people are incubating a child in the environment of their unresolved stuff. Of course, all these people are having literal DHS, biological conflict, caught off guard moments, having that shock. And what's this really about? It's about what happened way back then, this unresolved thing from someone who, had an affair and was unfaithful. And, and then we had a sexual frustration conflict and another one and another one. And so that's how it keeps going down. I mean, I just spoke with someone this weekend where her experience, she's like, well, I don't know. I can't see how this happened to me. I don't see how it's a trauma or a conflict that I had. And when we talked about the family line, it was like, well, yeah, it comes from 2 generations back, and you had your own version of it once you arrived on the scene, right? And so I think that while the purists have that there is a good heart there, I do think that they kind of miss out on a lot of insight and a lot of expansion of understanding by being very, serious and literal and to be like in this lifetime only without looking at the family tree. I think that they could miss things potentially. And so I like the whatever works. And I think that so many insights I've personally had, and that like when I'm working with people, the familial and ancestral connections, they're undeniable. And it makes literal biological sense that it would be that way. And so I like the blending of things to get to the what works the best for an individual to have the insight they need to have in order to evolve.
Yeah, and what needs to be clear is that German New Medicine is the codification and synthesis and a body of work of how our true biology works in accordance with nature. So it's not a method of therapy, right? It's about you understanding your biology and then integrating that into your life. Family constellations work, past life regressions, hypnosis, X, Y, and Z. Those are all the therapy and the different modalities and the different tools that we can use in alignment with our biology to, resolve or work through things or better manage something. But the two, to me, are different, and we can use them together, but GNM is the understanding of how our biology works. And I think there's an amazing book called, it's only in German, it's called Ein medizinischer Insider packt aus, but it was written under a pseudonym name. And what it means is a medical insider sort of unpacks or tells all, right? And what they said about German New Medicine in that book is like, Palmer was right. And it's too bad that they're all fighting amongst each other because no one takes the work seriously because all the educators are like, oh, this person knows it, this person knows it. So it deters anyone from even learning it. So I always say like the 5 biological laws don't belong to anyone, but we belong to those laws.
Yeah,
and
thank you for
territorial conflicts, like you said about the infighting. It's territorialness. It's it's I. This is and Dr. Hammer. He was rightfully territorial because people wanted to steal his work, and people did steal his work and put different labels on it and call it different things. And that's why the German New Medicine is what he called it for a very long time until he renamed it Germanische Heilkunde, this Germanic healing knowledge. But yeah, there was a lot of territorialness that he had over his work because these are his discoveries, and people taking this work that that you had the insight. He lost his son, which caused him to develop testicular cancer, and then he made these connections, and so he was rightfully territorial about his work. But then obviously the people who have learned from him in the same way have adopted that territorialness in a way that I do think is detrimental to spreading the message.
Yeah. You see that so often, with pioneers. It's like 2nd generation, 3rd generation, you're dealing with this type of infighting. You're dealing with people taking the knowledge and then integrating something else and then calling it something new. And, it does get watered down often. So I totally can see both sides of it for sure. What's like, talk more about the brain scan. It seems like it's hard. Like, is it easy to get a brain scan? Like for any individual that goes, hey, I'm into G&M, but it seems like the really scientific piece of G&M is this thing where you can get a brain scan and you can see the Hammer foci and see what conflicts are running and where they are in the process of it. Like, how does someone go about getting a brain scan and have it read as well?
Well, it's actually, I mean, a lot of people are doing it all the time. I haven't personally gone the route. I'm interested. Maybe I'll do it at some point. But you basically just need a referral. And I know that there's like online things where you can like say, you know, I'm having a bunch of headaches, and they'll give you just an online referral to go to, you know, a radiology clinic where you can go and have this and pay for it. Or there's independent radiology clinics where you can have something like that done. So it really isn't that hard to actually get the brain scan.
Is it a specific kind of brain scan that you have to request?
It's a CT brain scan, the no contrast standard layer. So those are just the basic standard layer, CT no contrast. Those are the specifications. And then as far as getting it analyzed, there's a handful of people from around the world that know how to do it. And I know that training courses are in the works to to teach people how to do it. But, you know, we do have one particular doctor that we refer people to. It's kind of a line to get to him. But yeah, that is certainly, and hopefully we'll have more and more resources for that in the future. I don't know how difficult it is in other countries like Canada.
Yeah, it's more difficult for us because we don't have a private healthcare system. So, you know, you would need a referral that could take you months here. And then you would be like going into the medical system, which a lot of people who learn GNM do not want to go into. So I personally haven't done it, although my mother has done it. She's gone to Germany and had hers done and read. I know that they're working on making it much more accessible, but I also think that, you know, this is new technology and we didn't have this. And if you're aware enough, you know what symptoms that you're running, and you can work just as beneficial without one. But sometimes it's nice for people to get clear. On the other hand, those hypochondriac clients that I work with who get brain scans, oh my gosh, they can come to me with like a whole list of things that they're, you know, that they saw in their brain scan, and now they're this and now they're that. And so sometimes I don't know how beneficial it is depending on the type of person that you are, but it's a tool that's available for you.
Did your mom find it beneficial for her personally?
Yeah, well, especially because, you know, my mom's in her 60s, so she found it interesting also to become aware of, you can see based on the scar tissue of the Hammer focus of what you had that you've now resolved.
Oh, wow.
So that was really interesting for her. And she's also postmenopausal, so that's also going to change your psyche. It's going to make you flip to that masculine, more territorial side of the brain. So for her to sort of see that was very fascinating. So she did get a lot out of it. But for years, I mean, she's known this work for years, and she actually only did it a few months ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, you know, for her, she was just like, yeah, but this, I want to know. And she did find it beneficial, but she has a really good awareness of how she best integrate this. And I don't think she minds me sharing, you know, the cerebral cortex, that conflict of separation, that's the conflict that also has memory loss attributed to it, right? So that's when we see people in their older years go and have Alzheimer's, or they forget things. And she was running that program. So she found that beneficial to think to herself, okay, the more I resolve this separation, the more it helps me with my memory. Not that it's in a drastic you know, phase for her, but something that she can know, okay, I need to work on this.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think I talked to you about this, Melissa. Like, my father died, wow, a week will be a year. And since then, my mom, you know, she spent some time with us here. I could tell, I feel like some of her short-term memory has been, you know, a little shaky, not the greatest. And so, you know, I can only I guess deduce that it had to do with like my dad's passing, because it was so obvious. Like, before it wasn't this way. Now there's some moments where it's like she tells me something, then she repeats it, and she didn't realize she told me it. So we'll see how things unfold there. But Yeah. Once you, personally speaking, once you start like embracing these laws and you learn them to the degree that you learn them, I'm not an expert at all, but like it just makes sense. Like everything in my life, the symptoms that I'm navigating, they make sense. And it's like there's so much peace there. There's so much just like, I don't have to be scared. I don't have to live in fear. And it's like, this is what I want to pass along to people. This is why we've had 8 or 9 episodes on this subject on this podcast, is like, so people can move through their life and go, I don't need to be scared of fucking a few zits on my cheek or, symptoms or rashes or whatever's going on. It's like, I can have a deeper understanding and accept myself more and move through the world more lightly because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is why Alyssa and I keep having kids. We're just not scared.
Yeah.
But seriously, they've never been to a doctor. She has a decent understanding of GNM, and like they're super attuned to her. They're super healthy, and like I can only speak to how empowering this knowledge has been for my family. In that and by itself. So yeah, I completely agree. Did you have something, Erasmus?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean,
what I want to talk about, I don't think we've addressed this before. Can you guys speak into the flying constellation a little bit? Maybe give a brief overview of what that is. I know it's connected to people like being more interested in the supernatural or flying, even ufology can kind of fall into this. And I'm curious, is this more common in women as well?
Well, the flying constellation, like we said before, it's 2 conflicts on the opposite sides of the brain and the brain regions. It is the control center for the laryngeal mucosa and for the bronchial mucosa. So it's a scare fright plus a territorial fear. So something that made you scared, speechless, and also that made you afraid in your territory. So basically a double fear. What does the brain do when you are bombarded with 2 fears? It flies. And so this is out-of-body experiences. This is when people feel dissociated. This is when they feel disembodied, when they feel like just this disconnect. It's because it's safer to be above, right? Where the people, will explain, I felt like I was above my body looking down. Well, that was the flying constellation in action, doing its perfect adaptation, which is to help you to get out of this doubly scary, like terrifying situation. And so this is like when a child is interested in fantasy or different worlds, or like, let me lose myself in Lord of the Rings, let me lose myself in Star Trek or, Star Wars. It's like that world is so much safer. It's safer to be up there than it is to be down here. If it's not safe to be here, why would I spend a lot of time really like being in my body and being in this realm? And that's what it is. It's an alternate reality. People who are in a constellation, they are not operating in reality. They are operating in something apart from their reality, something that is a dream world. They're really dreamy, right? They get into all sorts of things and spirituality, and they like to fly. They like to even take different hallucinogens, or they because it's like, this is a different world. It can show me different possibilities. And it's also the inventor constellation. It's the the discoverer. It's if I didn't have this. And so again, this is the gift of it, is it helps us to imagine new realities, to create new things. And so as far as women being affected by it more than men, I mean, if a man is really, I think that men and women both equally, I don't know, you'd have to do brain scans and
with the sexual frustration conflict, right? Our teacher loves to say, the more sexually frustrated the female, the more spiritual she becomes. So it's like, if I can't find a man here, I'll marry God, right? Or like, what's on the other side for me? So there is that aspect to it. And we do see women much more present in the spiritual world than we see men. Although maybe like the guru X, Y, and Z, that is more men, or like the Pope. But if you look at the nun, right? She marries Jesus. She gives her sexuality to God. And that's like a sexual frustration conflict there in and of itself. And it's really interesting to sort of dive deeper into that, because there is also a biological spiritual component of, like I said before, the female turning spirit into matter. And perhaps there's the notion that, the man takes care of us in the physical world, and we as women, we protect and take care of the spiritual world for our men. So maybe there's that sort of symbiotic relationship going on there. But you can get even deeper into the flying constellation, even if you dream that you fly and you're sort of rising up, then okay, I'm more testosterone heavy. Versus if you dream that you're falling down, then okay, there's a little bit more estrogen there. To the point where, Hammer and some of his colleagues studied people who have psychic phenomenon, who see other beings. And he would say if they're more benevolent beings, they were higher in testosterone, versus if they were more malignant beings, then they were more estrogen depressive. So you can really, really have a good view of what's going on and really get these things when you know it well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as Melissa was kind of explaining that, like the outer worldliness, like the dreaminess, like very strong correlations to like the Piscean archetype, like astrologically. And like I'm curious, like do people like kind of choose their conflicts, in that sense, if someone's like has strong Pisces placements, et cetera, definitely sounds very similar to the description of the flying constellation in some elements.
Yeah. Also, I in the last few weeks I've been talking about the telepathy tapes that seem to be pretty popular. And from a G&M standpoint, I don't know if either of you have listened to all the episodes or a few of the episodes. Like from a G&M standpoint, these nonverbal autistic children that have, according to these experiments, like have the ability to connect telepathically with not only like their mothers, but other people and each other. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that via the G&M lens.
Oh my gosh, I just listened to it, and it is amazing to hear obvious things that it's a super sense. So Dr. Hammer knew when these kids go in, it's because it's not safe out here. And there was a story, one of the kids where the mother's describing how like violent her husband was, and how the husband was like abusing one of the other children. It's like, oh, this makes so much sense. So the autistic constellation, so like the nonverbal, that's the scare fright, the laryngeal brain relay. And then it's also a territorial anger. So that creates the autistic constellation. And then a lot of those kids have multiple constellations. You can tell that there's flying constellation involved, where one's like, I didn't even know I had a body. It was described in the podcast. Didn't even realize that I had hands that could do things. And so it would do like stimulation of like, hey, you have a body. And so it makes perfect sense. So Dr. Hammer also, in the chart is the psychic window. And so these constellations can open up this psychic window for these, psi phenomenon, these things where, I'm clairvoyant, or I can predict the future, or I can see things before they happen. Or, these kids, and it's really amazing. I just am so loving that podcast and the fact that this is out there in the mainstream of people realizing, hey, consciousness is not a fluke of the brain. Consciousness is before the brain. Consciousness is everywhere. And so these kids are linking up and talking on the hill. I thought that was just so cool.
Amazing.
That they're able to communicate. And of course, they're so linked with their mother. And these conflicts and they happened early, and they're able to see. And so, so Dr. Hammer did talk about this psychic window, this ability to, to connect beyond just my brain. But those constellations are what opens the door. Because they even said that, most people, that everyone has like this capacity, but if you have all these other senses, and if you are kind of not constellated, or if you're more interested in the physical world, right? You're not interested. Why do I need to psychically communicate with you? But if my physical body is frozen because I've got a motor constellation and I've got an autistic constellation and a flying constellation, it's just not safe in my body. Well, of course, I'm going to prefer to just communicate through the psychic realm. And so I just think that it is incredible, and it makes so much sense. And if we knew the story of each of those children, right, that's the step I want to take. Mm-hmm. I would love to link up with the people who did this documentary and to see the brain scans. If we saw the brain scans of the kids in that documentary and able to connect the dots, come on, that would totally just blow the lid off and really help people to see the connection between the conflicts and the adaptation and then the super sense. And so we could really just build that whole picture for people.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It also makes me think of Walter Russell too, being able to tap into like universal mind and just have this knowledge. Like you're not even trained and you know how to be a sculptor or a painter or whatever. And some of these children, they know these languages that they were never so-called taught. Like that to me is what's so fascinating from all that. But yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to get brain scans of these kids and then to approach things from a genome standpoint. Anyways, I wanted to bring that up because I've just been kind of like in awe of this podcast. And then I'm telling everyone I know, I'm like, have you watched it yet? Have you listened to it? Like, it's just so cool, because also too, it's like for many of us, and for society, like we see these autistic nonverbal kids, and we're just like, fuck these kids. They're what do they have to offer society? And then you realize, and even some of these parents realize that like my child of 10, 15, 20 years, they actually can, understand me, or they do have these abilities. And I don't know, that podcast brought me to tears multiple times, just because of that. And then we bring in the conversation that we talk about all the time, even about vaccines, because I like having these conversations. Like, not everyone who gets 72 vaccines, is injured. And, why do some get it versus others? And so if a child already has one one conflict present on one side of the brain, and then they go in to get their vaccine, and then they think that's like an attack, or they're scared, or whatever the case may be, boom, instant, shift in personality. And I just think that's another conversation that needs to be had, even in relation to like the telepathy tapes and autism in general.
And there are many children who have autism who were never vaccinated. So there you go. That's that like, gnosis of the one black swan, right? So you have to take that into account. I always say that to people who are like, it's the vaccines. It's like, well, actually, there are many accounts, and autism has existed for a long time. So let's look at it from, the adaptive nature versus getting into fear again.
Yeah,
and I think this
for sure. But it's interesting what you said about like the personality change happening, parents noticeably happening to their child at the time of the vaccine happening, which probably does connect to the constellation thing.
Yeah, because not everyone, not every 2-year-old or, on your 6-month well visit or 12-month, well visit is like, regressing or having these issues. So it's, it's just.
And in that instance, it was the vaccine, because like that doesn't matter what kind of attack it was. It ultimately
it was the act of receiving it, and then the child's maybe, or the organism's perception of it that had that created the the secondary conflict, and then the personality change. But this is why I love GNM, is because it is so much more specific and nuanced and complex than just like, oh, vaccines cause this, or stress causes this. And it's like, no. We need to get really, really specific and understand the miracle and the genius of the human body, and also consciousness and perception.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why, thank you guys so much for making it such a core like platform, on your podcast, because so many people are still kind of hedge, and they still kind of open up. It's just when you see the correlations, the direct connection between the conflict and the and how it really shapes the picture. Because, I was even speaking with someone this weekend about, like, oh, well, it's the detox pathways, and it's like, they can't do this. And it's like, well, why? If it's about some people have better genes than other people, well, why? Genes are downstream, your ability it's downstream of the adaptation of the conflict. And so that does get us all back to consciousness. And rather than looking at the material, because if we're looking at the genes, because like I'm sure someone listening to this still thinks, oh, well, the reason some kids that get the vaccine are fine versus others is because their detox pathways are clear, and and it's like, well, why are some people's detox pathways clear and others are blocked? Well, it's the genetics. Well, why are the genetics the way that they are? If, and because again, if we're looking at it, if we look at it as the toxin, if we look at it as the genes and the detox pathways, that's materialism. That's materialism. We're looking at the physical stuff because there's a reason that the pathways are the way they are. There's a reason the genes are the way they are. There's a reason, and it's because of the conflicts. Even I would say that the fact that you came into contact with this toxin, right, that a person has to be conflicted in some way in order to put their baby on the doctor's table and allow them to inject that doesn't come from a person who's conflict free. That's a person who is under the ideology of medicine, right? They're in the cult of medicine. They are in this religion. What causes a person to be religious, right? A post-moral constellation or a flying constellation.
But is all ignorance a conflict?
is all ignorance, a conflict.
Like if someone's ignorant, if someone's just ignorant of the fact that, this is damaging to my child, even though I agree with you, it should be like a biological response. Like, why would I stick a needle in my kid? Like, is that necessarily a conflict? Like, is indoctrination a conflict? Like, is my question, I guess.
Well, yeah, if you're indoctrinated, somebody has put you under their dominion, right? And you had to comply with that. And once you complied with the dominion saying, oh, you have to do this, you're conflicted. You're not free.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you look at the mother, right, she switches. So anytime the female's not ovulating, she switches to the masculine brain hemisphere, that territorial side of her, right? We've all seen, I'm sure you, Joel, have experienced it, like the mama bear, right? If you go for a mother's children, she will come for you. So for a mother to give up her children like that, or let's say for, a mother to circumcise her son, like there's something there. That's against nature, right? So there's something there. She's denied, suppressed, or lost that aspect of her innate biological ability to protect and defend her children. And interestingly enough, like we sort of in GNM look at the circumcision as the first territorial loss for the male, right? That's a territorial loss conflict. That already is going to lower his testosterone and up his estrogen, right? So why did this even come about that we as a society are castrating the men in that way? Or if you look at, the notion to put women on birth control. So there is depending on how nefarious we think the powers that be are, there is a real motivation to make women more masculine and make men more feminine.
And even if you probably asked like the majority of these mothers at the moment of circumcision or at the moment of the vaccine, like there would have been like an intuitive thing, where it's like that they had to shut down and shut off to like follow through with it, I think.
Yeah. And I also want to say no guilt, no shame, everybody. Like even my mom has vaccinated me as a child. And when you know better, you do better. So like there's that aspect of like, you're doing it from the place of the goodness of your heart, of your awareness at the time. But yes, your conflict and your life experience maybe didn't give you the wherewithal and the strength to make a wholehearted, truthful decision from your core being. And maybe there's an aspect of us that like, again, we choose our family, we choose our parents, we choose that experience to come into a family that does this with us, or that we go this pathway. So I don't want to get into like the mom guilt and shame, because boy, do we work with mothers and they carry so much of it. So I'm not adding to their load, but just to keep that in mind.
So I should stop fucking with my mom and be like, I can't believe you let them circumcise me. And that like you listened to the doctor who said that you shouldn't breastfeed me and all the other things. Okay, good. Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. Really, I thought this conversation was awesome. I know we were talking about obviously the biological woman stuff, and then this kind of ventured into a lot of different areas. You have a biological woman course coming up. Is it sold out yet, or
We're about half full, I think. Okay. And we start on February 6th. It'll meet on Thursdays at 11 o'clock Pacific time. I think it'll go from around 11 to 1. And so you'll have access to the core modules. Each week there'll be a new module where we go through different biological organ systems. And, we'll do a week all about aesthetics, so women and, beauty and the way that their body looks and self-devaluation and acne. And then there's a week on the cervix, a week on the uterus. And so we'll week by week kind of go through each of the organs. And then we also, the group meetings are about coaching. So like hearing what are the women in the class who are taking and learning the thing, what's coming up for you? Right? What are the struggles? What are you working through? And then we apply a lot of different tools to helping you. And just the group format is really wonderful, kind of just being in, this environment of women who are learning. We just got so much out of the way. We've run the course once before in the fall of last year. And it was just beautiful to hear the women and their stories and what came up each week as we're learning and diving deeper into it. And so, it's an 11-week course. And we're very excited for this next round.
And where can people access it?
All right, Natasha, you want to?
Sorry, where can people access it? You can go to Melissa. Can you plug the website?
Yeah, if you go to drmelissasell.com, and then you'll go to my courses, and that's one of the first ones that you'll see is the biological woman.
Amazing.
Yeah, and women support other women in this container, which is really, really lovely because, even in our last container, there were women who were on their conception journey who could support each other along that and share within our chats and within our calls. So it's really nice that not only are you getting the support from, us as sort of guiding this container and program, but you're getting to connect with other women. I know women found people in their city or in their state that they could see in person. So it was a really, really beautiful program to create more sisterhood and create more women that know this work and could integrate that within their relationships. So people had good experiences there. And I'm always just looking forward to meeting new women. Each container is different because it's the people that make it.
Awesome. Any final messages for the women out there?
Learn how your biology works, and not live in fear of your body. Anything your body is doing, even if it seems like it is not good in this moment, there's a reason. It makes sense. And if you can start learning, we learn the language of adaptation. We learn the language of biology. We learn, how does this make sense that my body is doing this? Even if my conscious mind right now doesn't understand it and thinks that it's a bad thing. If we zoom out and we see this story, you don't have to live in fear of your body. Your body is fully capable. It built itself. It knows how to rebuild itself if the environment is right. And getting the environment right means getting your psyche right, which is resolving the conflicts and seeing, the stuff in your lineage and in, your relationship with your mother and your, in your thoughts about yourself. What's going on there? When you find the core of these conflicts, you can resolve them. Things can change and you can live the life of your dreams, truly. Like you can physically, transform your body. You can have the relationship that you want. It's simply, we got to see what's blocking it, and so where those conflicts are, that's where you'll find your solutions.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is just our forgotten wisdom that we are returning to as women. And even the women in our course, there are countless women out there who just really feel like they've been sold a lie. They went, they got their careers, they got their degree, they got their this, and they're not achieving the full happiness that they truly desired and understanding themselves in the most honest way. And so coming back to this forgotten wisdom is really, I consider this like my spiritual activism. This is the activism that I am doing to sort of come back to our roots. And I think it's so important for us women as the life givers to do this. And even if I look at my mother or some of the older, that crone demographic that we had in our last course, they just said gosh, I made mistakes as a parent, but I believe in the future of this generation. And now I signed up my daughters to learn this. And now I'm watching my daughters raise their grandchildren and the way in which my, my psyche wasn't able to, but I get to still, even after all this time, make a ripple effect and make a change. And so they really showed me that also it's never too late and that you can return to this innate knowledge and this gnosis, this inner knowing at any time.
Amazing. Ladies, so much love, so much respect to both of you. I'm grateful to be able to call both of you my friends. Have an amazing time this weekend at the Austin event and the G&M Austin event. Sophie and I are bummed that we unfortunately had to cancel the trip, obviously due to LA and the fires and everything going on here. But hopefully we'll do it again another time. And yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
No, absolute pleasure. Everyone else, thanks for listening. Take care.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean. Fast forward and evolution.